Hey guys, so I've got another really good book to share with you, and this one's called The Crooked Sixpence, and it's a part of a series called The Uncommoners, and it's the first one. There's three of them out so far, and they're so good. They're just really weird and twisted and just a little bit unusual, so you can really kind of imagine what's actually happening in the story without having to feel too pushed out of it, without having to have it feel too weird and alienating. And this book is so new that I've still got my receipt in it. I keep as like a little bookmark. I love it. Okay, I'm going to read it to you, and I've got to say, this one's got the good smell. Like, if you've ever smelled a book, new or old, there's nothing that compares to that at all. So, let me read the first chapter to you. Ivy rocked forward as the ambulance turned a corner. Everything inside rattled. Okay then, the paramedic said, looking up from his clipboard. He was a bald man with faded tattoos all the way up his forearms. What's your full name? Ivy Elizabeth Sparrow, she fired off, tapping her yellow Wellingtons on the floor. It was so stuffy, she needed fresh air. She looked over the paramedic's shoulder and wondered if she could ask him to open one of the blacked out windows. She could see her frizzy brown curls bobbing in the glass, even more out of control than usual. At the other end of the bench, leaning forward, legs apart, sat a boy in a grey hoodie bearing the band logo of the Rips. His wiry blonde hair had fallen in front of his eyes, but Ivy knew he was glaring at her. It's Seb, the boy replied dryly. I'm her brother. The paramedic smiled as he jotted down the name, and Ivy tried to push Seb out of her mind. This was all his fault. She leaned over to the stretcher and she took Grandma Sylvie's hand. It felt softer than usual. There were Velcro straps across her grandma's chest, a brace supporting her neck, and a misted oxygen mask covering her nose and mouth. Ivy had never seen her looking so fragile before. And how old are you both? The paramedic continued. 11, Ivy replied, shuffling ever so slightly closer to Grandma Sylvie. I'm 16, Seb said in a deep voice. Ivy frowned and glanced sideways at him. He'd only just turned 14 last month. Okay, good. The paramedic's face softened. Now, I understand that you're both very concerned at the moment, but trust me, the best thing you can do is to help your gran and stay calm. When we get to the hospital, we'll take her into casualty so the doctor can have a good look at her, and she may even need an operation, so she'll have to stay in for a while. Ivy grimaced. A grimace is kind of like a look of pain or thought, so if you grimace, you're like, that's kind of a grimace, okay? She knew of only one other occasion when Grandma Sylvie had stayed overnight in hospital. Everyone knew about that one. But it had happened before Ivy's parents were even born. Do you know what's wrong? She asked the paramedic. The paramedic frowned. I think she may have broken a hip and possibly her wrist as well, but we won't know until we see an x-ray. While he scribbled down some notes, Ivy stroked Grandma Sylvie's hand and wondered if she'd suffered broken bones that time as well. Probably. She'd been in a car crash during a freak snowstorm and had been unconscious for days. And when she woke up, she couldn't remember what had happened during the accident, or even anything that had happened before it. The police only knew her name because she was wearing a necklace with Sylvie written on it. It's a good job I've got my own then, isn't it? If I get in some sort of snowmobile accident, people will know what my first name is. Retrograde amnesia, Ivy's mum called it. Ivy knew the exact date of the crash because the family discussed it so often. The 5th of January, 1969, 12th night. Before we get to the hospital, the paramedic said, I need to confirm what happened. He checked his watch. I make it 8:30 a.m, so the fall must have happened at about 7:45. And you said that your gran slipped in the kitchen while you were both in the other room? Ivy imagined Grandma Sylvie losing her balance and tumbling onto her back, legs in the air like an upturned beetle. If only she'd been there to help her. Seb swallowed. She was baking mince pies. We heard her shouting. Over our shouting, Ivy remembered. She shot her brother a look of regret. They'd been arguing about the stupid new Rips poster he'd gotten for Christmas, and Ivy had accidentally knocked her orange juice over it. If he hadn't been ranting at her, they might have got to Grandma Sylvie sooner. The paramedic flipped his paper around. Okay, that'll do. And are you able to get hold of your mum and dad? Ivy sighed. If only. More than anything, she wished her parents were there now. I've texted them, but there's been no reply, Seb said. I'll try call them when we get to the hospital, though. Mum's working, but we might catch her before she starts her shift. Ivy had said goodbye to her mum yesterday morning. If she was there now, she would have clapped her hands together and taken charge of this whole mess in an instant. Ivy and Seb had done nothing except ring an ambulance. Our dad's in Paris, Ivy added in a quiet voice. He working too. Their dad was a consultant for the famous Victoria and Albert Museum in London, which meant he was an expert in everything old, and people from around the world were always asking for his advice. The paramedic raised his eyebrows. Is that why you're staying with your grandma? Mum and Dad were with us over Christmas, Ivy explained, feeling the need to defend them. They just had to go back to work early. It never really bothered her, them staying in London and leaving her and Seb 6 hours away in Bletchley Scrub with their grandma. But then, this kind of emergency had never really happened at the same time before. The paramedic put down his clipboard and he turned to Grandma Sylvie, who, despite the neck brace, made an effort to smile. Ivy doubted she could even hear what was being said with that thing on. She hadn't corrected the paramedic about Seb's age, for instance. The paramedic turned and said, Okay then, Mrs. Sparrow, I'm just going to check how you're doing. He untook Grandma Sylvie's blanket and he rolled it away until her arm was exposed. There was a thin cotton sling around it, secured behind her neck. Delicately, he loosened the knot and he slid the material out from underneath. Grandma Sylvie winced. As the sling was taken away, Ivy caught her breath. Her grandma's entire arm was purple and bloated like some giant aubergine. The paramedic took the damaged wrist carefully between his fingers. It looks like that swelling's getting worse. It must be very sore. He studied it from every angle. Ivy caught a flash of gold on her grandma's skin. I didn't see any clasp on your bracelet. I think we might need to cut it off to make you feel more comfortable, Mrs. Sparrow. Is that okay? Ivy's chest tightened. She imagined Grandma Sylvia was probably doing the same. That solid gold bangle was one of the few items that remained of her grandma's life before she got amnesia. She'd been wearing it at the time of the accident, and Ivy could not remember her ever taking it off. The bracelet was just special to her. Everyone knew that. Sylvie squeezed her eyes closed. Ivy heard a rasping. Do it. The paramedic found a pair of small silver pliers, and Ivy shivered as two soft pierced the air and the two halves of the bangle fell away. Ivy, my bag, Grandma Sylvie lifted her other hand, pointing shakily. Ivy reached down for the handbag and held it open. Very carefully, the paramedic put the bangle inside. Will you look after it for me? Sylvie said. Ivy nodded. Be careful, the paramedic warned. The ends are very sharp. Ivy made sure not to touch it as she zipped up the pocket. Here, Seb said, picking something up off the floor. You just dropped this. He handed Ivy a black and white photo, the size of a postcard. Ivy had seen it so many times before because Grandma Sylvie always kept it in her handbag, and it was the only photo of her from before. The police found it in the glove box of her car after the crash. Weird, Seb said, raising his eyebrows. I haven't seen that since I was little. We used to look at it all the time, Ivy thought. Grandma still doesn't know who the other woman is, does she? Ivy shook her head. The photo showed a woman standing beside Grandma Sylvie. She was slight, with sharp, dark eyes and unruly curly hair poking out from under a round black hat. She wore a thick, tartan dress and studded cowboy boots. Grandma Sylvie was dressed in washed denim dungarees with what looked like satin ballet shoes on her feet. What were they wearing? Seb asked. It's that really weird fancy dress. Ivy shrugged. Who's to say that wasn't the fashion? Keep that safe, croaked a voice. Ivy turned. Grandma Sylvie was waving her good arm in their direction. Sorry, Ivy hastily said, tucking the photo back into the handbag and fastening it up. Seb slid away from her before she had to push him. So, that's my kind of initial paragraph. And I think what I really love about it is it's the idea of this family secret, and that it plays out across generations of the family. So the grandma and her grandchildren, and then obviously her children sort of in between. But it has lots of things that make me identify with it. So one of my favourite museums is Victoria and Albert Museum. They have clothes and costumes from all throughout history, and it just feels magical whenever I go in. I feel like I can see something I've never seen before, and it's very far away in London, but it's a good place to go for a day. And I just find it really interesting to see the idea of this little gold bangle, and what if you were caught and you couldn't remember anything about your life, and you had one ring or one piece of jewelry or a watch or a toy or something, and that was the only link to who you'd been before. I kind of find that a bit magical. So I hope you enjoy it. I'll keep going this year every week with a new recommendation. And I'll put a picture of it on my door in my room so that you've got a little reference point and you can maybe go home and talk about it. I got mine in Waterstones. I think I saw it in Asda. It's definitely in the Tesco, in the Derby library system that you can loan for it for free. Okay. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.